pastor, I was 30 years old. And when I would receive a brochure about one of these seminars, I would quickly toss it away, considering it completely irrelevant. Well, 22 years later, my perspective has changed significantly. Now, when I receive notice of one of these seminars, I hold on to the information, knowing that even if I don't attend, I probably should. What I'm referring to is a pre-retirement seminar. Don't misunderstand me. It is not my intention to retire anytime soon. I hope that you will be stuck with me for many years to come. However, this brochure indicates that this seminar is for people over age 50, or for people who are within 15 years of retirement. And knowing that that fits me on both counts, I figure I had better attend one of these sooner or later. As most of you know far better than I do, you need to have a viable plan for your future. Thus, you need to consider some serious questions beforehand. How much money will I need? What will my expenses be? Where will I get my health care? And ultimately, can I afford to retire? These are all obviously important questions, and ones that we must adequately address before deciding to retire. I share this because as I look at today's gospel lesson, one of the most perplexing parables Jesus shared, followed by some shocking, even disturbing comments, it seems to me that this is at the heart of what Jesus is trying to say to us. And so, this morning, let us take a closer look at that story to see what the manager did to secure his future, and then to see what Jesus is saying to us as to how we might best secure ours. In words directed to his disciples, which includes each one of us, Jesus begins, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.'" Immediately, Jesus introduces us to the two main characters, the rich landowner and the manager of one of his properties. And then he gets to the crux of the situation. This landowner has been negligent, squandering his boss's property. Squandering being the same word that Jesus used, or that Luke used in the previous chapter, to describe the actions of the prodigal son. This manager had been given tremendous responsibility. Because the landowner was absent, he was put in charge of the day-to-day operations. He was left to make the important decisions on behalf of his master. However, as we learned, this manager failed to live up to the trust that had been placed in him. He carelessly wasted the possessions that he had been asked to safeguard. not surprisingly, when word got back to his boss, he called him into the office and told him that he was being let go. And here, the landowner does something curious. He fires the manager, but he doesn't tell him to clean out his desk and be gone by the end of the day, which probably would have been the prudent thing to do. Instead, he tells him that he wants a full accounting of his management, which was essentially like giving him 2 weeks' notice. While we may question the wisdom of this landowner, letting his dishonest manager keep working for a little while longer, what we learn is that this manager took full advantage of his opportunity, knowing that he was soon going to be fired from his job, his good, high-paying job. He immediately started to think seriously about his future. He considered his options, but they didn't seem very promising. As a white-collar worker, he concluded that he was not strong enough to dig, and he concluded that he was too proud to beg. But then the manager has an epiphany, one that he is sure will secure his future well-being. He will contact all of the people who owe his master a debt. He will bring them into his office, and he will strike a deal with them to significantly decrease the amount of their debt. And that is what Jesus says the man did, precisely. And while Jesus shares with us only 2 examples in this parable, reducing the jugs of olive oil from 100 to 50, reducing the containers of wheat from 100 to 80. The idea is that this manager brought in many debtors and decreased the amount they owed for each and every one of them. Of course, the reason he did this was simple yet profound. By taking advantage of his opportunity, the manager made these people indebted to him. And so when he was ultimately fired by his landowner, he could go back to each of these individuals and remind them what he had done for them and how they now owed him a debt in return. Was it a deceitful action on his part? Absolutely. But listen to what Jesus says. And the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. In a shocking conclusion, the landowner commends this manager, not for being deceitful, but for being shrewd, taking advantage of the opportunity that presented itself. The manager used the resources at his disposal, and he made a secure future for himself. But what about us? How do we secure our future? What can we take from Jesus' words that we can apply to our own lives? These are good questions. and ones that I believe Jesus addresses somewhat in his additional comments. To begin, Jesus makes this very interesting observation. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. Jesus' point is this: when it comes to securing their future, the people of this world can be quite shrewd. They invest wisely. They plan diligently. Even though their future will only last as long as they live, they do everything they can secure it for that entire time, because they know that is all they have. Second, Jesus looks directly at his disciples and makes this very enigmatic statement. I tell you, he says, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. What I think Jesus is basically saying here is this: our wealth is temporal, of this world only. When we die, we will not take it with us. However, while we are on this earth, we can use our wealth for more than just our own temporal purposes. We can invest our wealth in God's eternal purposes, supporting the work of the church, sponsoring missionaries whose calling it is to spread the gospel message, advancing the work of God's kingdom throughout the world. And in a wonderful image, Jesus tells us that when we enter into the gates of heaven, we will be welcomed by a large group of friends, many of whom probably we have never ever seen. But those who are there because we chose to invest our money into God's kingdom as we live here on this earth. No doubt, this is a complicated parable Jesus shared, and his words of explanation are difficult to grasp as well. In an attempt to try to summarize some of what I have said this morning, let me close now by sharing the words of the third verse of our hymn of the day, Be Thou My Vision. Riches I heed not, nor vain empty praise. Thou my inheritance, now and always. Thou and thou only, the first in my heart. Great God of heaven, my treasure thou art. Amen. As I just alluded to, our hymn of the day is Be Thou My Vision. It is hymn number 793. As